Hey everybody, I hope you are well. They tell me there have been a couple of nice days. I'm looking now at the window in my office and it looks like there's some blue sky and some maybe spring temperatures. So I'm looking forward to hopefully getting outside today and going back to the northwest corner. I came in, this is a big week. I came in on early Monday morning and I have not returned. I have not left the Hartford area since then. So I'm looking forward to returning today once I clean up a few things in my office. So this is was what we call JF week. Every committee has one, and as the finance and appropriations committees are the big committees, this is our JF weeks. We have the latest deadlines in the legislature. So we had 2 days of JF committees, and again, JF stands for joint favorable, and that means that these are the bills that we pass, that we vote on in the committee, and we pass out of the committee. And we had those meetings here on Tuesday and Wednesday, and they involve a lot of process, some of which I'm going to take you through in a moment. And of course, it involves passing the fiscal side of the budget. Appropriations passed their side of the budget, and they are still in session today, although I think they're in caucus at the moment. And then after that, we keep an eye on one another, and then we join forces and we construct one budget that will, of course, be balanced because that's our required duty. So I thought I'd give you a taste of sort of what that looks like in the last few days, because as we all know, humans don't. I like to try to get things done ahead of time, but that's kind of impossible when you're dealing with this many people. So what you at least try to do is think ahead to what your risks are. And I was looking at my notes for the week, one of the overarching themes is that there be no surprises. And that means making sure that along the way, as you're negotiating policy, you are, for me, that means talking to the governor and his chief of staff, talking to the treasurer and his staff, talking to my ranking member, the senior Republican, House Republican on the committee, and others involved in other particular issues, so that they know what's coming and that they're not surprised and don't feel whipsawed by things, even when they don't get what they want. It's better for people to know, this is not, budgets that we pass out this week are not final documents. There will be much negotiation that happens between them, but they're a statement of what we're trying to do. And process-wise, that means, so we didn't have committee meetings on Monday, but that meant that we were spending the whole day exchanging what's called JFS language. That means the bills that are heard, the language of a bill when you have a public hearing is its JF language. That's the original language. And when you decide to amend it, maybe you heard some good testimony at the public hearing and decide the bill needs changes, and we had many of those. It gets substitute language. That's what the S stands for. And so at the meeting, the motion is always to JF to the floor, which means the floor of the House of the Senate, depending on which bill it is, or JFS to the floor, and that means joint favorable with substitute language. So a lot of process we have to review to, particular numbers of, not just the numbers of the bills, but also the numbers of the drafts that are the substitute language, because they are often done at the last minute, and so they're not yet public. We have to make sure we distribute them to all members of the committee and name those numbers accurately so that the public record reflects that, so that people can reconstruct and find the language in the aftermath of the committee. So Monday is spent exactly doing that, exchanging a lot of drafts, making sure which draft we've okayed, having, the chairs negotiate it, we agree on a draft, then it gets officially okayed and sent to the committee staff, which then makes it ready to be distributed to the committee. It also meant on Monday, we meaning myself and my co-chair, Senator Fonfara, meet with the chairs of the bonding subcommittee. So that's we are the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. And bonding is the part where we use the state's credit card, effectively, to make grants to municipalities, to state agencies, to do capital infrastructure type of projects. And the bonding subcommittee does a lot of work with the state agencies and others to formulate that bill. And so we meet with them and go over their first draft of that document on Monday. We make our own changes to it, and we, shop it around and talk to other people, and that bill gets sort of negotiated and changes during the day. We also settle on, we do have 2 JF meetings, so this is largely my job. Often I take all the bills that we have, including the biggest ones, which are the bond bill and the revenue package, which is the fiscal side of the budget, and divide them up between the 2 days. And you try to balance it between of course, between House and Senate bills, but also the bills that are quick and easy and the bills that are a little more complicated. It might take a little more time, and try to create two relatively balanced agendas with the understanding that the second of the day we will do the budget, and so that tends to be a meatier, longer meeting. So that does take time, to divide that up into an agenda that was reasonably balanced. So once we settle on that agenda, my next call, of course, is to the House ranking member and to go through that agenda with him so that he sees what's on it, asks any questions, resolves some differences. Maybe he has some suggestions that we can make to make things go more smoothly. And then I held a caucus for the House Dems on the committee, just a Zoom call on Monday night, because on my pursuit of no surprises, just wanted to make sure people were, people sit on several different committees, and, some are able to pay a lot of attention to the Finance Committee, some less. So it's good to just go through where we are so that they're not surprised by anything, and give them a chance to ask questions in a protected environment. Again, when we caucus, there are certain rules about caucuses. So you're not going to hear me talk about what people say in caucus, because that's a private conversation. And it gives people, particularly newer members on the committee, a chance to ask questions and get their feet on the ground so they understand what's happening. So that took us well into the night. Then on Tuesday, again, Tuesday's the day of the first JF meeting. That will tend to be the easier one because it doesn't have the actual budget in it. But what we do in both of these meetings, there's a similar process, which is they both convened at 11, which means we sit in the room, at least most of us are there at 11. I convene the meeting, and then I immediately gavel out, because both caucuses, the majority and minority parties, will have caucuses, in-person caucuses in different rooms. And we go to those rooms to then review with members, because I'm talking to the leadership of the committee all the time, but it gives us both a chance to talk to all our members about what's on it. And at that moment, those caucuses start when we have a hot ticket document that we start hearing from advocates and people anyone who's interested in our issues that they want to get a hold of. It's the annotated agenda. So all of our work, we rely very heavily on the Office of Fiscal Analysis, which runs the numbers for us, and the Legislative Commissioner's Office, which does drafting, and the Office of Legislative Research, which gives background and explains how bills work and how it fits into the statutory construct and maybe what other states are doing. So OLR and OFA in particular prepare these annotated agendas for us, which explain exactly what the bill does, and how much it costs or how much revenue it generates. So it's very important for us to have those documents, since those documents enable us to have a really substantive caucus meeting. And sometimes those take a little time, especially for the things that we humans are monkeying with up until the last minute. So the Tuesday one being a little simpler, that was ready relatively quickly. So we started our caucuses pretty quickly. I will note that in general, one of the things that happens, just looking at my text chain with the House ranking member, that the majority caucuses tend to take a little bit longer in this case than the minority caucuses, for the simple reason that we have bills on the agenda, we expect them to pass. So we have to make sure they will pass, which means we're vote counting. And it's interesting, almost very few of the bills on the Finance Committee agenda are straight. You will see a straight partisan vote. There will be, on our side of the aisle, there will be either progressive Democrats or more conservative Democrats who may not like a particular policy. And we will pick up, yes Republican votes and no Republican votes. So it will be a mix. You will see vote counts that are mixed, and I kind of like that about the Finance Committee. Sometimes our issues, they're not really partisan issues. They are there will be a difference of opinion, but it doesn't always map out on partisan lines. And so because we have the bills on the agenda and I need to know which bills we're going to call, we have to spend a little more time making sure we have support and what the votes are. And that just takes time. So I empathize with my House ranking member whose caucuses can go a little bit more quickly. Then, let's see. Again, once a caucus is done, my first call is to, usually because their caucus is done earlier than ours are, he's calling me, and we talk about where we are on the agenda. So for example, a number of bills that there will be no disagreement on, he will move to put what's called on consent. And so that means, in fact, on that agenda on Tuesday, we had 21 items on it, and 10 of them went on consent. So that means they get put you vote on them all at once, and it means there's no opposition. It's a unanimous vote. And it speeds up the process a little bit, because everything we vote on, these are final action steps a committee takes, and so they can't be done by voice, for example. They have to be done individually, and roll call for a 50-odd person committee takes a long time. So it's very helpful if you can put things on consent. And so, again, having a, good open relationship with your ranking member is really helpful, and he was great. We had a lot of things on consent. So by the time we finished those caucuses, we had gavelled in at 11, waited for the reports, held caucuses. We don't really get back in until about 2:45, I guess, something like that. And then the meeting went fairly quickly on Tuesday, and we were done maybe by 5:30 or 6. And then that night I held another Zoom caucus. Everybody had gone home because there was a new idea that had been introduced, because that's the night we really finalized the budget. We've gotten some of the other stuff out of the way, and we have to have all these budget spreadsheets that are dated with time and date stamp, because we're constantly meddling with them, because again, we're talking to the governor's office, I'm talking to House leadership, Senate leadership, and Senate leadership had a proposal they wanted us to include in the revenue package, which we hadn't anticipated. And so I needed to have a caucus with my members to find out whether they supported it. And they did not, as it currently stood. So it did not get included but it took a long time, because people have to think about it. They have to talk to their colleagues. They have to understand, think about how it, what their constituents might think of it. So again, that took us, fairly late into the evening. And then Wednesday is sort of our final day of JF meetings. And again, that is all about exchanging these spreadsheets, because, we mess around with, maybe we should include this, and what about this structure? That takes the Office of Fiscal Analysis a long time. They have to run the numbers, because they have to, make sure that they are correct. And we had both this new proposal that the Senate was airing, which was a temporary capital gains tax, essentially in response to the proposed tax cuts at the federal level, which, if passed, will result in significant funding shortfalls to the state of Connecticut, particularly in Medicaid, somewhere on the, between $1 and $2 billion. I've heard other numbers as well, but those are the ones I've heard most often. So we had to discuss that. And then there's also a pretty tricky sort of structural thing, which I'll talk about at the end of this, that just takes time to work out. And again, lots of conversations with people who are involved in it, so they understand where we're going with this. And it's complex, so it took a long time. But we did, again, Wednesday, gavel in at 11 o'clock, gavel out, and immediately go into caucus. And this time, takes longer to actually start caucus because of those annotated agendas. They on Wednesday, typically the day we do the budget, they're not ready, because of course we've been monkeying around with things till the last minute, and so we have to wait for the Office of Fiscal Analysis and the Office of Legislative Research to do their work. And so that sort of gave us a little time we waited. It took probably about an hour and a half to get those reports ready. And so that hour and a half, I spent an hour of that sitting down with my ranking member and going through my notes and verbally going through the agenda and what I expect to be in the annotated agenda, so that, again, he's not surprised. He knows what's coming. He can raise a couple of issues. Maybe we can resolve it. We had a bill from the Attorney General's office, and, they had an objection, and maybe we can fix that. And just to make sure we understand what's happening, so that we can at least understand one another and clear up things where that's possible. So that takes a while. And then when the annotated agenda, the minority was able to start their caucus, we did not, because this time the Senate decided to have a caucus on bills generally, but particularly with respect to one. We have a big energy bill, Senate energy bill that actually was proposed by my co-chair. And there were a lot of pretty significant disagreements about that bill, and also questions about what committee it should be in. And so the Senate was discussing that and other things, and we felt, because that was a really important bill, and a lot of us on the Finance Committee found a lot of pieces of that bill pretty interesting and worthy, given all the conversation about, electric costs, and it really, we've felt strongly that it could address that. And so we wanted to give the Senate a chance to support the bill and come to some sort of agreement on it. And those conversations can be hard, because people have different ideas, and, sitting down and doing the hard thing is worth doing. So they did that, but it takes time. So we waited for them until about 2:00, and then we started our caucus. And again, my sympathies to the minority party, because they did not have to wait for that, and they were probably pretty done with their caucus by this time we started ours. But then we went through the agenda. We went through a new proposal from the Senate, and it was a more modest proposal this time around. The original proposal on the capital gains tax had not passed in committee in a casual conversation. This one was more modest, and it did. It had the support of committee, so we added it to the agenda. And then, so we started the actual meeting probably around 4:45, 5:00. And we ordered pizza for the conference room next door so that people wouldn't get hangry in the course of the meeting. Then the meeting probably went on until 8:30 or 9:00 because we went through. But again, we had probably half the items on the agenda went on consent because we'd had a chance to talk through them, and which gives the ranking member in turn a chance to talk to his members and to focus on the issues where there is true profound disagreement, and to get the stuff that we're in agreement on done. We also had one other, at the end of the final JF meeting of any committee in the state, probably in any state, we often have our sort of goodbyes and thank yous, because we do rely on, a lot of our, not in finance in particular, we rely heavily on our nonpartisan staff, but also our partisan staff, which does an amazing job. So we make a point of thanking them and acknowledging them, often for the sort of unseen work that they do. And in my case, we were particularly, as some of you know, my wonderful aide, who has been great for the last 3 years, is relocating with her wife to Maine. And her wife was transferred, and so she will. That was her last JF meeting. This week will be her last week, and so I will have, somebody excellent will step in her footsteps. But I will miss Ash a great deal, and I know many of you will too, because she's really been a fantastic aide. So we all made time to make sure we thanked Ash for all her work and friendship and counsel, and that takes a little extra time. So. This is getting long, but in terms of the budget, what do we actually do? And I will touch on two big picture items. So the first is we passed a child tax credit. Connecticut is one of the few states in the country that whose tax code does not adjust for the presence of children in a family, and we have been trying for many years to address that. It can be costly. We had as you all may know, there was a significant, for a while, significant federal child tax credit, which, cut child poverty really nearly in half. It's a really powerful tool. The state is not in a position to do it at the level that the federal government can, but we can make a step and start it. And so we were able to pass within a responsible budget a modest child tax credit of $150 per child, up to 3 kids. Limited to certain income brackets. But I'm pretty proud of that, because it's been important to me not to do something just symbolic, but to do something sustainable and permanent. And I think we can make this work. So it was an important step to have that included in the budget, and I hope we will have support for that going forward, particularly right now at a time of a lot of affordability challenges and families needing a little some assistance and some knowledge that we see you, and that we're going to try to help do what we can to respond to your immediate needs and also to what's happening at the federal level. And the other, so in terms of our Connecticut's fiscal response at the federal level, what we have in Connecticut, as many of you know, these set of budget constraints known as the fiscal guardrails. And that constrains our spending. And it also sort of sets aside a certain kind of revenue, which we call volatile revenue, which are certain kinds of tax payments, which do tend to be volatile because they're very tied to the markets. They have been very positive in recent years, but they do move around a lot. And if you look at any recent chart of what's happening in the stock market recently, they are moving around a lot. They are robust. Again, this year, they have been for many years, and these constraints have enabled us to create, for example, a very healthy rainy day fund known as the Budget Reserve Fund, which is one of the best in the country. It's now at 18% of our annual budget. That's really strong. That is there in order to protect us against a recession, which we all know the threat of which is more significant than it was a few months ago. So really important that we continue to have that structure. But even in addition to that, creating that rainy day fund, these guardrails, these volatile revenues have exceeded that 18% level, and they've been helping us pay down our pension debt, which has also been important. Connecticut had one of the worst records on paying its pensions. We tend to get the sort of most improved player award at some of these fiscal conferences I go to. We are, in fact, paying down our pensions more quickly than really anyone in the country. So that's something to be proud of. But it means that we do have, this year in particular, over $1 billion in volatile revenues that cannot be budgeted in the main part of the budget. The budget reserve fund is topped up at 18%, so they would either go into pensions or we could hold them. What we have created is a proposal that allows us to hold that revenue in place in a version of the budget reserve fund, but which is specifically targeted to responding to federal cuts. That gives us the constraints that's what it's dedicated for, not for just ordinary, annual budgeting matters, but the flexible, nimble structure for us to respond in a way that involves both the legislature and the executive branch, and to propose spending plans that we can decide what we can, because of course we can't fix all of them. So we need to vote, but we can some, and we need to figure out which ones those are, and this would enable us to do that. So that part is a little bit, it's hard to describe. It's even trickier to write, and it's a little bit fluid because we have to figure out what way to do it. And that's the one, of course, that involves a lot of conversation with the governor's office, with the treasurer, both of which I've been talking to on a regular basis about how best to structure it, because I think we all have an agreement in philosophy that this is a prudent way to proceed, to be ready for what we rely on projections in the Finance Committee all the time, and this is a material projection, and we need to have a plan in place to deal with it. So that's it for me, and I hope you have a great weekend. I've not looked at the weather, but I hope it looks a little bit like it does right now, and I'm looking forward to going home to the Northwest Corner. I hope you all have a great weekend. See you soon.